Welcome. It's a little late in the day. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, people. So what I'm drinking here is actually spruce beer that I made from a tree right outside of my window. It comes from a book called Medicinal and Healing Beers, I think, by Stephen Herod Bruner. And my friend Therese gave it to me for my birthday a little over a year ago. And it's a cool book. I mean, I make a lot of these beers, so it's got a great recipe for ginger ale, spruce beer, which this one has spruce, of course. It's got lemon, ginger, and sassafras in it. I have a sassafras tree outside. In the back, they're all over the place out here, and it's not really high in alcohol. It's probably 4 or 5% alcohol, so I could give it to my kids. Actually, you have to drink a lot of it to get drunk. But I'm not here to talk about this, but I guess it's kind of connected. What I want to talk about is this word enchantment that gets kicked around quite a bit these days, especially in relation to some quarters of Christianity, of people kind of hankering for a Christianity of mystery and wonder, and not necessarily about social justice and protest. You know what I mean? The shit gets old. So. And there are a lot of people out there who are part of this Christian re-enchantment thing, though I don't like the term enchantment, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But in fact, there was somebody here maybe a month ago, a little bit over 6 weeks ago, who interviewing me for a documentary on re-enchantment. Now, and I'll tell you why I don't like that in a minute. But a couple of the other people who are often cited when this topic comes up. One for sure is David Bentley Hart, who has he's unashamedly a believer in fairies, for instance, and mysticism. And similarly, another person who's unashamedly a believer in fairies is John Milbank. So now we have the Orthodox covered, the Anglicans covered, and me, the Catholics. My relationship to Catholicism is like Goethe said with his relationship to Christianity. He said, "I have a Christianity for my own private use," and essentially, I have a Catholicism for my own private use, and apparently, it includes spruce beer. It's so good. So this word enchantment, right? It's often raised, a few years ago, people were getting into this "make Catholicism weird again" movement. So you could talk about, on our farm, for instance, we have coming up St. John's Day. Today's the solstice. And St. John's Day, the customs were in the olden days, and people still do these things, are to jump over the fire on St. John's Day. And which is a cool thing, because St. John, Jesus' cousin, right, St. John the Baptist, his birthday is 6 months before that of Jesus, right? If we look at the calendar, I mean, even though some people will claim that Jesus was born in April and 5 years before the BC AD change, that's not important. Being scientific like that is because what we're talking about are metaphysical it's a poetic metaphysics is what we're talking about. And having St. John's Day be 6 months before, and near the summer solstice, be 6 months before the birth of Christ, which is near the winter solstice, it makes perfect sense. Because what does St. John say about himself? I must decrease while he must increase. So you could say the physical sun in the northern hemisphere decreases in power over these next 6 months, where the spiritual sun increases. And that's one way to look at it, of many, right? But this word enchantment gets kicked around and added to that, right? And so another festival, right? We didn't do it this year, but we usually do May Day on our farm. We also do the 12 days of Christmas. We have a big 12th night party. So we try to keep that. We try to keep the merry in Christmas. So we're certainly not Calvinist or Protestant in that way, right? We drink spruce beer. So here's why I don't like the term enchanted. It implies being under a spell, right? You are being enchanted, or mesmerized, or something, right? And I don't think that's accurate at all. So when people talk about re-enchanting the world, they're kind of, oh, let's make it fun, but that's not it. If you want to be enchanted, I mean, we all are enchanted right now. We're enchanted by modernity. We're enchanted by the scientific revolution. We're enchanted by the Enlightenment. That's the spell we're under. We're getting enchanted by ChatGPT and AI, which it's going to fizzle for sure because it's just garbage. But that's the enchantment that's going on right now, right? This is how we're enchanted. We're enchanted. You could say people are enchanted by the internet or by pornography, which is available through the internet, right? That's enchantment. That's when you're under a spell, right? And as I have argued in some of my earlier videos, I mean, people in power, in seeking to keep and stay in power, use those weapons of enchantment, which they're all forms of black magic. Whether you want to believe it or not, they are. I mean, it's how black magic works. It works through word and image, and that's how all the enchantment we're subject to. That's how that works. And so in writings about magic, for instance, going back to Plotinus and Iamblichus, then a little bit more recently, Eliphas Levi, they all say the same thing, right? That people of a nervous disposition, and certainly what we went through 5 years ago with COVID, a lot of people pushed a lot of people into nervousness or anxiety, as we know, right? We lived through it. That those people of that constitution are more easily swayed by, you can call it magic or enchantment, right? It's easier to enchant those people. It's not easy to enchant people who are actually free of that. And I would suggest that the opposite of that kind of enchantment is actually being oriented to the real. So when we talk about, like I was talking about St. John's Day and Christmas, or the existence of fairies, or the existence of ghosts, or the power of relics, the power of sacred spaces, like whether it's like a tree or fairy tree, or churches, especially old churches, have you can feel the sacredness there. You can feel that you're in a special place. Often people get the same feeling or a similar feeling entering a pine grove. Or near here, I've been there a little while, but there's a beautiful old growth forest of beech, and you walk in there and you feel this kind of magical environment. It's kind of a very special place. And then some bozo always carves his name into the beech wood because it's got smooth bark and you can carve into it very easily. Gotta hate people. But anyway, I forgot to take a sip. Plotinus even says, I think it's in the third Ennead, I think, that people like to be enchanted. They do. People like to be enchanted because they don't have to think anymore. It's much easier to not think and just go with the cultural flow, whatever it happens to be, or just surrender your will to somebody else or to something else. On the other hand, when people talk about my work and they use the word enchantment, I think it's just the opposite of enchantment. In my work in sophiology, I am more interested in an accurate picture of reality. So let me give you an example. And we've all had this experience, right? Where maybe it's through nature or through the arts. It happened to me through all these places. It happened to me through nature. It happened to me through music, whether it's playing music or just attending a concert. Or very often for me, it's why I do it. It happens through either writing poetry or reading poetry. Now, it doesn't happen every single time, but it happens. Or it happens for people during liturgy as well. There are these moments when the thing you're beholding, there's a moment of disclosure or revelation that comes through it where it's the best way to describe it is though something is shining into you or into our perceived reality from the other side of whatever it is we're beholding. And now that might sound weird, but I think this is a very common experience. I mean, it could be a sunset, could be something in nature where you feel something speak to you. If you feel transcendent, it feels like a touch of divinity. A story I like to tell, and I've probably told it before on this channel, is Simone Weil, the French philosopher, who grew up in an atheist Jewish household, but found herself in her 30s attracted to Catholicism. And a priest she knew gave her a copy of not George Herbert's poetry, the Metaphysical Poets, like a anthology. But she really fell in love with George Herbert's poem Love 3, which maybe I'll read for you if I can find it. And she loved it so much that she translated it into French. And whenever she felt a migraine coming on, she would start to recite the poem to herself. And she said in a letter to a priest, as a way to calm herself and to hold off, get the migraine to hold off. But she said after a while, this poem took on the virtue of a prayer. And during one of these recitations, she said, Christ himself came down and took possession of me. So that's what I mean. Now, it didn't happen to her the first time she read the poem. I'm sure she liked the poem. It's a great poem. But that's happened to me, I don't know how many times, where something transcendent becomes immanent. It crosses the threshold into our world, and we kind of cross the threshold there. So it's kind of a mirror image. It's what Sergei Bulgakov, the Russian theologian, calls it the metaxu, the between, and it's also William Desmond, the Irish philosopher contemporary. He also calls it the between, the metaxu. So we enter into that between, where we're not totally in this world. We can call it this world. We're not totally in the spiritual world or the world of divinity, but we're kind of in between those two worlds. And it's those moments, I would suggest, that make life worth living. I would even suggest that, probably not always, but I think with the communion of souls, with married love, or falling in love, we all have had that experience of the transcendence that comes through that. There's also lots of other things that come through at different times as well. But the thing is, that thing comes through, and it's unmistakable. Just like our experiences of nature are also inescapable. That we have these, and that they're profoundly meaning. And the thing is, of course, when you try to explain it, it starts to fall apart, kind of like golden dreams. Once you try to grab a hold of it, it disappears. And once you try to explain these kind of transcendent experiences, they melt, they go away. But But I think like David Bentley Hart or John Milbank or me talk about the existence of fairies. We're just saying this is a rational way to address the way the world addresses us. That there is more to it. And if you think about fairies, I don't want to get. I've done videos on that. Well, with fairies, for instance, every culture on Earth has some similar kind of spirit, right? Every single one. So, and so there must be. In fact, I shouldn't say there must be. There is this other realm that we maybe have lost the ability to perceive, but not everybody has lost that ability. And maybe it doesn't work all the time. And maybe, again, this is a kind of... you have to be in the right disposition to experience it. Just like, with talking about experiencing a poem. I mean, there are some poems or parts of Scripture I've read hundreds of times. I like it. But there's this one time where something shines through it. And it's unmistakable. I'm sure this... In fact, if this has happened to you, drop a comment in the comments below, because I think it's common, is what I'm saying. It's a common part of our experience, but we're taught to ignore it, or we're taught to blow it off. Even I think you see often with children who, when they're little, can see fairies, but they can't when they get older. There's a great movie, I don't know if you've seen it, called Fairy Tale, starring Peter O'Toole as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and Bill Nighy plays Edward Gardner, the Theosophist. He's just wonderful. With the little girls, it's based on the Cottingley fairies, and the one little girl says, "Old people don't know how to see the fairies." I think there's a lot to that. They forget how to see. And so a lot of my work has been trying to orient us to what I call the real, trying to orient us to an accurate description of reality. Because I don't think certainly in my education, K through 12 through, PhD, I was never given an accurate description of reality. And it's one thing Thomas Traherne, the singing masters of my soul, says about, it's part of our problem is we had this horrible education that bred all wonder out of us. And it's true. Are you happy now? So it's kind of tragic that these things happen to us, but nevertheless, it's a weird thing when people use enchantment to talk about a belief in reality, when really we're all enchanted by all the garbage of our culture. We're just enchanted by it, and we think it's normal. It's just it's a kind of unbelievable. I would submit also that the internet, to a degree, there's certainly good things. I'm connecting with you guys on the internet, right? And I connect with lots of people on the internet, and it really is enriching to my life, and I hope to theirs. But there's most of the stuff that's on the internet, or most of our experience of that, is not of such a nature, right? And it's kind of interesting that the internet can become a kind of anti-otherworld. So when we talk about the otherworld with fairies, right, it's like this realm that's kind of parallel to the world we perceive with our senses, but it's part of this world, but maybe not something we can always see, the other world. And that's that's well attested. But the thing is, I think what the internet becomes is a kind of false or technological otherworld, where people get they would say about with the otherworld of the fairies and what have you, that the danger is to become lost there, right? You go there and you can't get your way back, right? Rip Van Winkle, great story about that, or many stories, and especially in Irish folklore, about people who Oisin isn't one of them, who wandered into the other world and didn't come back for centuries, right? But I think the same thing happens with the internet. We wander into that world, and some people never come back, right? They're presented a false reality, and it traps them. So that's that's mostly what I wanted to say today. Let me see if I can find that poem. I see it right there. Okay, I'm back. I got thirsty on that trip. Anyway, here's the works of George Herbert. And if you haven't read George Herbert's The Temple, I recommend that you do. It's certainly one of the best collections of 17th century poetry. The metaphysical poets, those are my guys right there. But anyway, let me read Love 3, which it's called Love 3 because he has two other poems titled Love in this collection. And this is almost it's at the end of the book. And what the temple does, it kind of treats life as a temple. It's also about the church, the Anglican Church, in which Herbert served as a priest. And it starts off, it's like a journey through this, and it's actually the first time somebody kind of composed a book of poetry with that kind of consciousness. But it ends basically like life does, with heaven. And so there's a poem called Heaven, and right after that is Love 3, which was like, you're already in heaven. And here's what happens in heaven, according to George Herbert. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind, ungrateful? Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not, says Love, who bore the blame. My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says Love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. So it's a beautiful image where heaven is an eternal Eucharist, right? And isn't that how people are? You get to heaven and I'm not worthy, right? I'm not worthy. And people have higher standards than God. I'm just telling you right now. They just do. God couldn't forgive my sin. And God's like, oh, come on. But that's enchantment. And in the good sense, right? That's a accurate depiction of the real, right? We are enchanted by false depictions of what the church is or the religion is, right? We get all kinds of horrid distortions of that. Yet, once and this is, you kind of have to develop this sense to orient ourselves to the real, because that is, in my experience, it's not complete, but it's the only solace out there, because then we see the world as God sees the world, right? Maybe just a glimpse, not entire, or as St. Paul says, through a glass darkly, but we still see. And with that, I'll drink to your health. Happy solstice, happy St. John's Day, and I will see you next time, my friends. Do good.